Good evening to all our participants and welcome to another AeHIN Hour webinar. Please be reminded that participants' microphones are muted throughout the questions box. Before we proceed with the presentation, I would like to introduce our two speakers. Dr. Alvin Marcelo is the Executive Director of the Asia eHealth Information Network and the Managing Director of the Standards and Interoperability Lab Asia. He is certified in CGE-IT, TOGAF, Archimate, and COVID. We're also pleased to be joined by Mr. Hani Escandar at the International
Therese, thank you very much. I hope everyone can hear me. There was a point where we lost your audio, Therese. Am I going through very clearly now? Therese, can you give me feedback? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you, Alvin. I can hear you.
Okay. Thank you, Hani. So, good evening, everyone. This is a special night for us at the Asia eHealth Information Network. We have Mr. Hani Eskandar from the ITU. Hani has been one of our pioneering members of the network. He has been advising us at the beginning, especially when we were just starting out with AeHIN and we were exploring the WHO ITU National EL Strategy Toolkit. So we have two parts for this presentation. Part one is about why enterprise architecture is important to us at the Asia eHealth Information Network. And then part two, which is the larger part of the whole hour, will be on the SDG Digital Investment Framework, a whole of government approach from Hani Eskandar. Next slide, please. So the story behind um, enterprise architecture in AeHIN goes quite back as far as 2012. And I will be sharing updates from the AeHIN's Mind the Gaps framework, specifically G for governance, A architecture, P for program management, and S standards interoperability, a framework that we'd like to promote to our members, share updates from our Ask program, and then find ways how we can align the enterprise architecture work of AeHIN with ITU's development framework for SDGs. And then Hani will have his own objectives as listed below, which I believe he will repeat again in his slides. Next slide, please. So when AeHIN was formed in 2011, the members, mostly from ministries of health, academe, and some from the non-government sector, did not really know how to move forward. We just knew that we needed interoperability and we needed to be able to communicate effectively with each other, but we did not have the tools. So finally, after 7, 8 years, we have summed up our lessons into the what we call the Mind the Gaps framework. And essentially, we believe that the interoperability and responsive health information systems are possible if there is governance first, an architecture governed over by a clear structure, good program management to implement the components of the architecture, and standards and interoperability that are consistent with the architecture. So we can read this as follows. Countries should ensure that there is a clear governance structure and framework to guide the design and implementation of a blueprint or enterprise architecture. The same governance structure and framework should ensure that stakeholders understand and follow the blueprint, aka program management, especially the standards needed for interoperability. And over the past 7 years, next slide please, AeHIN has been working on capacity building programs that enabled us to be better at these elements of the Mind the Gaps framework. For governance, we have trained 30 of our members on COVID-5. Some have obtained the foundation certification. Some have proceeded to the next level called implementation certification. We also trained 28 people on TOGAF from 12 countries, and additional 10 people from Sri Lanka on their own also obtained TOGAF certification. So right now we have at least 38 people in the Asia Health Information Network who are certified enterprise architects. For program management, we just recently finished the Prince 2 training in Kuala Lumpur. And for standards and interoperability, there's not much to choose from, but still confusing if you don't know how to select from HL7, ISO, and IHE. So we hope that with the Mind the Gaps framework, countries will have a systematic approach to building their national e-health development program. Next slide, please. Corollary to this is the ASK program, where we are now trying to connect the architecture, the standards that are compliant with that architecture, and the knowledge products that are implementing these standards into a policy paper. So right now, we are investigating if there are current alignment of architectural artifacts, standards, and real-world software applications or knowledge products. And we've conducted several activities this year to do that. We had a Taiwan workshop in March 2019 where we elicited the business needs from the countries or the country pain points. We had a lecturer and a speaker on architectural frameworks for interoperability, and we had the OpenHIE group telling us more about their work. We know that HL7, ISO, and IHE are standards that are already available for us for our picking. And we know that there are already knowledge products out there that are being implemented by countries such as DHIS2, OpenMRS, and the like. And many of these we believe should be documented in the WHO Digital Health Atlas, after which we can try to see an alignment between the atlas and the business needs of the country. So this is a work in progress, and we invite you to participate. If you're interested, just send me a private email. Next slide, please. So now we'd like to pass on the floor to Hani to tell us more on investing on our digital health to achieve the SDGs. And the question, perhaps, as we listen to Hani is, will digital health contribute to achieving the sustainable development goals? And if yes, how do we do that? So I'll pass the floor now to Hani Eskandar. Hani, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you very much, Alvin, for your introduction. And I hope you can hear me okay. Can you please confirm, Alvin, that you can also see my screen?
Very well, and we can see your screen. Go ahead, Hani. Over.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, hello everyone. Good morning and good evening. Sorry to keep you late in the Asia region. My name is Hani Iskander and I work for the International Telecommunication Union. I'm very also grateful for AeHIN invitation, kind invitation for me to present some of the work that we have been doing around architectural approaches. And I'm going to focus particularly in my discussion today around a report that we published early this year that we call the SDG Digital Investment Framework. This report is been a collaboration between ITU and the Digital Impact Alliance, and it's available on the links that you can see on the screen, which you can download for free and follow even during my presentation. The report is really it's about advocating for what we can call a whole of government or a whole of sector or a whole of society approach when investing in digital technologies. And we believe that this is a key paradigm shift that we are calling at to really achieve and scale up and mainstream ICT for SDGs. It's very much based on architectural approach, and we are fully at ITU aligned with AeHIN Mind the Gap agenda in terms of talking about the interoperability, architectural, and governance, etc. Because we believe those are still unfortunately the hard nuts to crack before we can really scale up digital health and ICT for SDG in general even, and before really we can make some impact and some transformational impact in the different sectors, including health. So I'm going to guide you through this type of framework and starting actually from the identification of the problem that I think we are all very much aware of. Um, the SDGs are really very much interrelated, and there is, I think, a good reason why they are being, presented in a circular format, because there are a lot of interrelatedness between each of the SDGs. You can put health in the middle, and you can immediately see a lot of interconnection with all the SDGs. This calls for holistic approaches. This call to, consider a more citizen-centric approach, i.e., taking a 360-degree view of all the citizens' needs when it comes not only to his health, but all the other health determinants that are having a direct or indirect relation to his health. However, the investment in digital, unfortunately, till today is very much fragmented and very much like the picture I've put here with some, colored building blocks that are completely disordered and completely, fragmented. And this is not a trivial problem. This is one of the key challenges in terms of scaling up digital health, scaling up ICT for SDG in general. Beside the fact of the duplication and redundancy, each building block or each investment has its own life. And if you want to scale up, then you need to invest in all those boxes and all those building blocks in a completely independent manner, which will increase significantly the number of the amount of investment that needs to be done to scale up. Without, of course, forgetting the huge impact on interoperability and the smooth information flow, etc. And this mindset is still unfortunately prevailing in the way we do investment and in the way we design solutions for digital health. There is a lot of hype around building new innovations, and while new innovations are for sure very important, there is still to a large extent a lack of what you can call an ecosystem approach or an overarching system approach. And this report is really trying to advocate for that and also give some practical tools where you can really engage in this paradigm shift. This paradigm shift will call for completely different approach to investment. When it comes to governance, when it comes to investment, you are not investing only in vertical solutions. You need to start also in what you can call horizontal solutions, and I'll come back to that later. It also requires a shift in the skill sets of the people who are involved in planning and overseeing the development of digital systems, that they also need to have a very strong understanding of enterprise architecture and in interoperability frameworks, etc. This has a significant impact on the end user, because if we are not able to reach scale, then we cannot reach the leave no one behind objective of the SDGs. But also, if we are not able to consider the interrelatedness between the SDGs, then we are always lacking to provide the user of a comprehensive set of services that would really help a human being or as a user, an end user, to reach the SDGs in a holistic manner. So this is the problem, and I think we are all very much aware of this issue. Now, the big question comes to say, how can we potentially rearrange those boxes, those disordered boxes, in a way that we can ensure interoperability, reusability, etc. So the big question that we can ask ourselves, are there some commonalities across those boxes? Are some of the functionalities that are done by those different boxes are to some extent similar? how can we find those similarities? And if we identify those similarities, how can we leverage this in a reorganization of, better to say, re-architecting those boxes in a way that can ensure, this type of mainstreaming of and scaling up and ease of deployment of innovations and scaling up of innovation. So this is the work that we have been doing, is really trying to understand, is there a set of common building blocks? And by building blocks, you can understand it simply as almost an architectural component, which is set of technology capabilities that deliver some functionalities that are delivering or meeting a certain business needs. So the idea is that we try to follow this logic. From one end, we have the SDGs, and from the other end, we have the building blocks. So what we try to do is the following. We identified a large number of use cases in three sectors: health, agriculture, and education, that are very common to initiatives related to the SDGs. Like, for example, maternal and child health care, like, for example, advisory service for agriculture, like, for example, illiteracy education for education, etc., etc. And we try to analyze those use cases to try to identify what we can call generic workflows or business processes inside those use cases. Usually, we can look at ICT as a way to improve business processes. But if you look at the business processes at those use cases, those business processes could be quite complex and quite comprehensive. However, if you manage to decouple and try to identify the most elementary business process, you will find out that basically what we are doing in different sectors is very much similar, but we are giving it simply a different name in many cases. So we've been able to identify elementary business processes or workflows that are very common uh, inside those use cases. Just to give you examples of those workflows is like, for example, communication, client communication. It's a business process where any entity, any enterprise, any government needs to communicate in a one-way, two-way, interactive, one-to-many, many-to-many, one-to-one with their end user, with the aim to convey a message, be it on maternal health or be it on agriculture best practices. So this is an elementary business process that has the same technology, underlying technologies that enable this business process regardless of the use case. So without going into a lot of details into the methodology that we adopted, we've been very able to identify a small set of common building blocks that are very much enable a large number of business processes that are put together, deliver a use case that relates to an SDG. Just to go into a bit of more concrete examples, just take this simple example across three different SDGs, 2, 3, and 6, which is again adopting this very simplistic example of being able to send periodic information to the end users, be it parents or pregnant women or individuals about specific type of content. We discovered that the underlying business process is client communication, and we can easily identify the types of building blocks that can deliver this business process. So doing that across a large number of use cases, we've been able to identify simply 23 building blocks that are very common across a large number of use cases, including health, but not only health. The list of those 23 building blocks are very well described in the publication. And then we have given for each building block a high level most common functionalities that are most common to one particular building block. Let me give you a little bit of information or details about how we define a building block. As I mentioned, a building block, you can think it's a piece of, it's a set of technology capabilities that can deliver some functionalities to meet a specific business need. Um, we have to think of building blocks that have the minimum common, the most common requirements that are very much common in using this particular building block. So it's not necessarily a very comprehensive functionalities, but we have tried to identify the minimum or the most common requirements and functionalities across those building blocks. Of course, those building blocks needs to be designed in a generic manner to be able to be customized and configured easily to cater to different use cases. What happens usually when you develop standalone siloed solutions that you develop those technology capabilities that are bespoke in a bespoke type of application that are very much tailored to your use case. With slight modification, you can make those capabilities slightly more generic so they can go beyond your specific business need and become more generic and could be used in other use cases. Like for example, when you talk about registries, when you talk about mobile messaging services, when you talk about um, you know content management, data collection, etc., etc. So the idea that we've been able to identify those generic, most common building blocks that could be uh, as architecture artifacts that are very much common, and we know that those are to be used in most cases. And the idea here is that if we manage to build these capabilities in countries in a way that those building blocks are open source using open standards with very clear standardized interfaces and secure by design, and you make those building blocks available for a large number of use cases, you have really helped the countries to put in place a foundational digital infrastructure that will help them to build on top of them a lot of innovation. Let me give you again a little bit more of sense and taste of the nature of those building blocks. Those building blocks are not the same. They are having different types of um, purposes. For example, some of the building blocks you can think of them as necessarily to what you can call operate the platform. A platform is a set of technology building blocks or technology components that are working together. So some of the building blocks will have the functionality or the objective to operate this platform. Like what, for example? Like identification services, security services, identification and authentication, to make sure that the information is flowing across different types of applications and that they are flowing in a secure manner. So services like terminology services, for example, is part of those components that are necessary to operate the platform. Information exchange and integration services, what you can call information mediator services, are also another example of a component that is very much responsible of this type of operation. Other types of building blocks could be also used for increasing your outreach and servicing some of the core services that you know that are very much common. And you can call this almost like common applications. Like, for example, we know that we need to outreach to a large number of people through mobile messaging. So that's a component that will help you to increase your outreach. And we know that this is very common. All component that relates to capacity development and e-learning and the like, or some core services like payments, etc., etc. So the idea and the logic of identifying those building blocks is that those are components that any government, any organization, any enterprise needs to have as foundational, as part of their foundational digital horizontal infrastructure that is upon which you can build up and deploy innovations. Let me give you real life examples, actually, very much adopting or following up those types of concepts, which are not by no means new. I think what we are trying to bring here is the identification of the types of building blocks that are relevant for SDGs by analyzing the use cases of the SDGs, which could be slightly different if you are looking at it from a pure business perspective. So I'm going to give you three examples, one from a more e-government perspective, and one from an e-health perspective, and then one from a completely different types of application, which I'm going to describe in a second. But all of them are very much adopting this building blocks approach. Here you see the application reference model, which is part of the India Enterprise Architecture. This India Enterprise Architecture has been published in late 2017, and it provides reference architecture for all government departments and government sectors. So all sectors are supposedly going to look at this reference architecture and do something similar. As you can see, it has slightly similar approach where they distinguish between what they can call the core platform or core components, and those are what I refer to are very important to operate the platform. If you look at India Stack basically this is what it has: the India identification, which is Aadhaar system, etc. And then it has Enterprise App Store, which is mobility management, which is they have adopted as mobility first strategy. So everything needs to be developed for mobile because of its outreach. So it becomes part of the operation of the platform to be able to manage and operate the deployment on mobile infrastructure through this mobile app store, SMS gateway, and ESB, Enterprise Service Bus, which is the integration and the information exchange components, etc., etc. So this red box is really the types of building blocks that are very much used to the operation of the platform. Then comes what they call the common applications, and those applications are very much common to any sector, regardless of who you are. When you talk about data analytics, when you talk about uh, uh, payments, etc., etc. Of course, content management, etc. Of course, this is very much related to a specific context, but we can do the same exercise when it comes to any sector. Why this distinction is extremely important? There are very strong reasons why this identification and categorization of the building blocks is extremely important. This will give you a very good indication about where the role of the government should end and what is the role of the private sector. You can argue that all the building blocks, because they are dealing with the data governance and data interoperability and information flow, security, operations, etc., those should be under the government own jurisdiction, under the government control, done by government investment and make available as reusable building blocks to everyone. However, what you can call the domain applications, the top two layers, those are should be some of them should be maybe done by government, but also should be open to private sector to come up with a lot of innovations that are not even foreseen yet, that are leveraging this digital platform. This was very much uh, well described in the very recently National Digital Health Blueprint, again of India. I chose India because it is one of the rare countries that have done all the different enterprise architecture at different levels, at the central e-government level and then at the sectoral level. So this is the National Digital Health Blueprint for the health, published by the Health Ministry and Welfare of India in April this year for feedback. If you read the document, and I strongly recommend you to read the document, they are extremely, very much repeating the same concepts of adopting building blocks and what they call the technology building blocks and data hubs, and they are differentiating this between the application building blocks. The government, while the government can engage in some of the application building blocks, but it should be open to much more private sector innovations to come and plug into what you can call the digital health platform, which is this set of reusable building blocks and common building blocks that are maintained and secure and made available by the government. So the in the document we have just published early this year, we have provided for each building block of the 23 building blocks a high-level description, as I mentioned, with the most common functionalities. And I think we need to think of maturity-sensitive building blocks because you need to start with minimum set of requirements to make it as simple as possible. And then those functionalities should grow step by step. For example, uh, I also maybe forgot to mention that one of the roles of the building blocks is to ensure um, the data governance, all the issues related to data governance, and providing data that should be the single source of truth through registries. So the whole management of those master databases across different types of patients, facilities, clinics, professionals, etc., they should be maintained and built in a way that is part of your digital infrastructure. This also calls for something else, which also AeHIN might be interested to work on, is the assumption that if some of those building blocks are available as default global goods, this will accelerate significantly the implementation of countries' blueprint and architecture by leveraging interoperable, secure, standard-based building blocks. Some of those building blocks, there are already some standards already available for some of them. Some of them are still yet to be developed. So that's another potential area where AeHIN and its member could really invest in. This is by no means a breakthrough because this is almost the best practice when it comes to building large systems, is to think about this, reusable common building blocks, etc. Why it was not happening in digital health? Because, as I mentioned, the investment was very much focused on a box per box type of thing, and with a complete um, ignorance uh, um, of the horizontal layers that should tie all those vertical programs together, and without which information exchange will not be possible. There are some architectural approach like OpenHIE, for example, that provide some or even a lot of specification about some of the building blocks. The framework identified other set of building blocks that goes very well beyond OpenHIE scope by having analyzed a large number of use cases We have looked at things related to collaboration management, consent management, content management, mobility, payments, reporting, scheduling, security, etc., etc. So just to maybe also give you another example of an application, a simple application architecture is what we have been developed at ITU for what we call the smart village. The smart village is a concept that has been piloted by Niger to develop and deploy digital tools to digitize and connect and digitally transform villages. And we have adopted the same approach by this layered approach where we have identified where the government will invest, leveraging which type of global goods, and then where the private sector or the NGOs or other development partners can come and complement by what we can call the domain application. I want to maybe spend just maybe 5 minutes on this concept of digital transformation. I'm sure you are very much aware and you hear a lot about this concept of digital transformation. It's now almost the buzzword in the ICT for SDG type of discussions. Many people are even, many organizations like OECD, World Bank, they have even launched their digital transformation program, like the Go Digital of the OECD, etc., etc. Actually, the point that I want to make in the next 5 minutes is that the enterprise architecture is really the key tool to achieve the digital transformation. Why? There is no necessarily like a common definition yet, at least, about what do we really mean by digital transformation. But at least from the word of transformation, it's really talking about impact. It's really talking about change. And it calls for not adoption of ICT as a tool to improve your business efficiency and business processes efficiency, which is the case so far, to a tool to really transform the way you do business, taking into consideration that digital is a fact. Meaning that is how to redo or redesign or reconceive the way you deliver care services, but taking into account that digital is a fact. How you can imagine new ways of uh, care delivery and patient monitoring and any type of services, care services, but conceived by design, including digital tools, and not digital comes as an ad hoc later on to support some of the business processes. This really calls for a complete review of the health sector on the way the business processes are done in a more comprehensive and holistic approach in looking at the use at the patient continuum of care, and all this calls for integration and interoperability, because you cannot talk about continuum of care without talking about integration and interoperability. And there are no other tools, at least known now, besides the enterprise architecture, to really being able to describe the integration requirements about the different applications and how those different applications could leverage and reuse legacy systems that exist already in the system. So the discussion about digital enterprise architecture goes very well now beyond simply, it's not a gadget, it's really a tool for digital transformation. And it's really at the heart of this discussion. If we want to check whether we have really enabled digital services that are transformational, I think we can go back to some of the service attributes, like is this service is personalized, is it really based on the user profile, is it paperless, cashless, presenceless, frictionless, meaning that information can flow without any friction and consent based, etc. it really calls also for a new player that is currently not a very active player in the whole ecosystem, which is a new player called aggregators. Usually this is for system integrators. Usually those types of players were not yet, unfortunately, very active yet into the digital health discussion so far. And I think if we want to implement digital transformation, enterprise architecture, we need to have those types of actors and players really leveraging already existing building blocks, but they are very clever in bringing those building blocks to work together and integrate them and build up building blocks that are really reusable and scalable. The result of the enterprise architecture is basically what you can call your digital platform, which is basically almost you can see it as your foundation on top of which you are going to build your implement and deploy your new innovations. And it's really the base for future innovations when it comes to artificial intelligence and IoT, etc., etc. Because all those types of innovations are really very much data hungry and they are really very much based on data and they are really based on aggregated data and integrated data. And if you don't have this basis, then you are preventing yourself from leveraging those innovations later on. So I think the discussion about enterprise architecture goes very well beyond simply improving the investment. It's really about much more stronger transformation of the health sector. And we believe that if you really want to bring enterprise architecture into concrete implementation, I think you need to have a very strong, robust understanding of this concept of what are the minimum building blocks that are reusable and should be interoperable, standards-based, secure, etc., that should be deployed in my country as part of my core investment to build my digital health platform so that I can ensure to provide the foundations for the future. Let me maybe jump to my last slide, some concluding remarks. I think we need to very much be cognizant of the fact that despite those well-intentioned effort, there are a lot of reasons whereby there are challenges in adopting a holistic approach, be it what you can call a whole of sector, i.e. across the health sector, or even beyond a whole of government approach. And I think time is very much now to really change the way we do business and the way we govern digital investments in a way that we can adopt those types of holistic cross-sectoral type of horizontal approach in addition to vertical approaches that are currently in deployment. My last 2 points, actually, I got inspired from something called the Shillong Declaration, which is being just published a few days ago in India again through the National E-Governance Conference that happened in India. And I would like to stress two points that there is a need to shift the role of the government from being a service provider or an application developer to a service enabler, meaning you move from developing applications to make public digital platforms and capabilities and services, common services where multiple competitive applications can be developed. The last point is really that you need to consolidate a lot of investment and projects in domain-based projects where you can decouple some of the functionalities and generalize them and make them available as common components or common software application or common building blocks that are reusable and that can be configured easily to cater to any number of use cases. I'll stop here and I hope my voice was clear and my also explanation was clear, and I'm very much willing to take any questions if any. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Sir Honey. So for all our participants, if you have questions, please feel free to type them in the questions box. Thank you.
Hi, Cherise. I have questions while the other participants are typing in their queries. Honey, what would be um, your advice to countries who are now in search of digital health solutions? What would be a systematic approach to this very complex question? Sometimes they don't even know where to start and they don't know what to look for or what to expect. So let's say there's a minister of health who approaches AeHIN and says, "What do I need to do if I need to start my digital health program?" What might be your advice? Over.
Okay, thanks, Alvin. See, I think the discussion around the enterprise architecture, etc., is just one piece of the whole puzzle, right? And I think you rightly mentioned that there are a lot of other pieces when it comes to governance, when it comes to regulations, standards, etc. Um, However, I think there are some key actions that needs to happen at any country level to really make them move from status A to status B. And I think the first step is to have this overarching strategy, which I think most countries or a lot of countries have already invested in. And I think now the focus shifts to the implementation of the strategy. So, first step is the strategy. Second step is to take the strategy and convert it into implementable technical and functional requirements. And how we do that is by developing the enterprise architecture and the interoperability framework based on the strategy in a way that could lead to implementation, i.e., put the enterprise architecture and the interoperability frameworks to be the basis to develop requests for proposals for any provider to develop the right application, be it EHR or whatever. In your enterprise architecture development, you are going to adopt all those between quotes best practices in identifying what sort of building blocks are required, what are the standards that will be applied here, here, and there. And then you're going to use those frameworks to inform your request for proposals. And this will be the basis by which you are going to assess the compliance of the services that will be delivered based on the architecture, or you are going to assess how to what extent existing applications could comply with the target architecture, whether immediately or following some modification. And if some applications don't move beyond the bar, then those applications should be retired or dismantled. So I think um, those two key steps, plus putting in place the governance structure, which should be immediately like your first step after your strategy. I think those are, at least for me, the three steps in addition to the capacity development that should be done in parallel. So I think those are at least four areas of investment that needs to happen at a country level that can really help a country move from the current status to move towards the future status.
Thank
Back
you,
to you.
Hani. Thank you, Hani. Therese, do we have questions already? Over.
Yes, we have a question from Dr. Pradeep. The question reads, can we know to what extent the digital investment framework informs and supports the ministries of health in their assessment or estimation of relative costs involved in customizing or extending the various global good-based building blocks to their country-level or bespoke digital health infrastructure specifications?
Yeah. Thanks for the question. I mean, let's acknowledge that this is a newly developed framework, and we've been now trialing it at least two or three different occasions for e-government, but also for types of application like smart villages, and also to develop the enterprise architecture for one specific country in Africa. Um, this is simply a tool that can help you when you are doing the enterprise architecture design. And it's very much aligned with the TOGAF methodologies and other enterprise architecture methodologies. It's a tool that you can use to inform the architecture, assess the level of uh, modification or amendments you need to bring into existing applications to convert them or to align them with the framework. And it also helps you to identify the roles and responsibilities of the management of your digital infrastructure. Who should be doing what kind of thing. So again, I just want to put it into its right context. It's not something that will do everything for you. It's a tool that could be used among other things to help you, inform the right or identify the right requirements in a way that can lead to interoperability, reusability, etc. Back to you.
Yes, Dr. Pradeep says thanks, Sir Hani. So I think that's the last question. There are no more questions coming in from our participants. So are there last words from our speakers?
Hi, Cherry. I do have one more question for Hani. And what would be a good approach? The title of the talk is Whole of Government Approach, but real, in reality, the AeHIN group has been working at it from the health side
Hmm.
of the SDG problem. And without naming any specific country, how do how does the health side communicate with the ICT side of the government if such structures do not yet exist? And
Uh, Alvin,
who,
sorry, I cannot hear you clearly. Can you repeat, please? Your voice is cut in.
yes, Hani, um, in many countries in Asia,
Yes,
the health sector and the ICT sector do not know each other very well.
yes, yes,
Who should make the first move, and
yes,
on on whose instructions should they start to work together? Do you
yes,
know what I mean?
yes.
It's like a brother and a brother. No one wants to make the first move because the one who makes the first move might take on more responsibility. So who would be the overarching supervisor of the two brothers to make sure that they start collaborating? Over.
Yes. That's a difficult question, Alvin, because indeed it very much depends on the context and on the existing digital initiatives in the country. There are some countries, ultimately, you would want to see that there is an overarching e-government enterprise architecture uh, that publishes what you can call a reference architecture that should be implemented and followed to create your specific domain architecture. This is the case in Korea, for example. This is the case in India now, with the enterprise architecture published in 2017 and the health blueprint published based on the India enterprise architecture. So if you read the published blueprint, the digital health blueprint of India, it is very much aligned with the e-government enterprise architecture. I think Bangladesh also have something similar. So there are some countries who have these types of logical, let's say, steps. However, in case you don't have an overarching e-gov enterprise architecture, I think your domain enterprise architecture, your health enterprise architecture should probably follow the same principles And if it's well designed, uh, in case one of the components is made available through a broader e-government uh, perspective, you can plug and play and change this component to switch to a more generic or a more robust component. And this is the whole objective of having modular design, is to be able to plug and play and be able to switch, different components and to replace one component with the other. So I think adopting best practices and for designing an enterprise architecture will give you this flexibility. And I think it's very important that even if you don't have an overarching e-government, that you still adopt the right principles and design your enterprise architecture that can allow you this flexibility. I think there is a very good case that happened in, again, India, where one of the states developed their e-agriculture enterprise architecture before the India enterprise architecture was developed. So, but given that it was well designed, I think making this shift if needed will be possible if you are adopting the right data standards, etc. But there is no easy answer, and at the end of the day, it all depends on how far you have some data standards that are also adopted at the government level to make this switch possible if needed in the future.
Thank you, Hani.
Back to you.
Thank you, Hani. We plan to continue talking about enterprise architecture and SDGs, Hani. So I'll be contacting you offline, and maybe we can invite other people who are interested in the topic who can share their own thoughts into the topic. I think we need to just keep on talking about this and gathering actual experiences, for example, from India. And I think in Bhutan right now, they're also
Yes,
studying some enterprise architecture activity. And then we just need to start learning from each other and then start seeing patterns. And I hope you can be with us as we go through this journey. We need your perspective coming from your vantage point. As the same way, we also need the country, people who are working on country level whole of government enterprise architecture, and hopefully we can stick these things together from the country perspective to the region perspective to the global perspective. So maybe
sure,
we
with pleasure.
ask, I don't know, Charis, can you ask Dr. Bunchai? Can you give him the microphone or it's not possible with the webinar? Charis?
Possible, Dr. Alvin. I'm just
Yeah.
waiting for Dr. Bunchai's microphone to load.
Yes.
Hello.
Go ahead, Dr.
Uh,
Bunchai. You can
yeah,
close
thank
the
you,
session.
Hani. It's very interesting webinar and presentation. I really like your conclusion on that the government should shift the role from the service provider to the service enabler. But as the Alvin discussed, uh, uh, I, I found that the ITU, the DIAL, the SDG investment digital investment framework, it seems like we are looking at the broader than health, and even inside health, it's quite difficult to have people to see this. So, do you have any uh, perspective or idea how can we uh, shift the the perspective of the government to see the whole, not the part, as you conclude, because it seems like many democratic government, they are now trying uh, to be the to, to provide several things like uh, I mean the micro loan, the USD or something like that, and it seems like they have to get the service and keeping them to be the enable. It's not good for them for the next election. Over.
Yeah, I think there is a lot of effort needs to be done in terms of awareness and education. It's not, while the concept is common sense, but still, for many reasons, it's not yet something that everybody sees clearly. Um, Everyone is still very much focused on his own scope, and they are very much incapable of looking at the overall system. So I think it requires a lot of education, like you are doing now, a lot of documentation, a lot of reports, case studies from countries, and I think, fortunately, there are some countries who have been already applying those concepts even beyond the health sector. And I mentioned Korea, but also I think Singapore is the same shape, um, and recently India. My suggestion maybe would be quite interesting if you share a country perspective, but not from the health sector, but from the e-government sector, and how, for example, Korea, they have created this e-government platform where they are making available some of the building blocks and components that could be leveraged by different sectors, including health. So I think this types of experience maybe we need to bring it to to the attention of different ministries, um, and also I think we need to invite not only the health ministries in those types of events, but I think we need to start to engage with the e-government people as well, because more and more uh, some of the investments will happen through e-governments, and there is no point for the health sector to do the same types of investments. So I think we need to continue to do a lot of capacity development and learning and awareness raising. And I really applaud your initiative to do this webinar, for example. But I think we probably need more than one webinar.
Yeah, another country that I aware is the uh, Estonia. It seems like
Yes,
they also starting with the big picture and then the kind of the umbrella of the digital
yes,
technology or transformation, and then create the X road that used by one of the kind of the enable that used by many governmental services.
yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely, yes.
Thank you,
And
Han. Dr. Bunchay, could you close the session? I think the lesson before you close the session, Dr. Bunchay, we need to help each other. Sometimes when you're alone in your country talking about enterprise architecture, no one will believe you. But if they start hearing the same thing across different countries, then maybe we can start attracting people to the idea of EA and blueprint. So, Dr. Bunchay, for the final word.
Yes, in Thai experiences, the enterprise architecture is seem like the alien buzzword, and no one not understand what it is. So it might be our jobs try to simplify or operationalize what these kind of the alien words to the common words that can be more understandable to the to broader audience. That is Thailand experience. Many people don't understand what it means by enterprise architectures, and they seem like, oh, this is too techy, I don't want to deal with. But actually, I like the word of the shifting the perspective from service provider to service enable, and then talking about the enable, the foundation that we are working on. Thank you, Honey. And I think we got a lot of insight, and then we think you can be, I mean, be our speaker in next time. And thank you very much. And we will work on this. Uh, Thank you for everyone for participating this.
Thank you,
Thank you for
everyone.
listening. Thank
Good
you.
Bye.
night. Good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.